Rabbi Keller and I earlier today had a little tiff via text messaging, and he used some profanity, and he did not. He would never do that. And the fight was over who was going to teach Chevra Torah tomorrow morning, because Vayetze, this week's Parsha, is really awesome. And you saw, for those of you who watched 1 Minute of Torah, that I placed myself in a wadi in Israel, which I put on the green screen. Now you're all going to go on YouTube and look. You saw the wadi. It wasn't the wadi I wanted. But nonetheless, next week's Parsha, actually there's a wadi in next week's Torah portion. But this week's Torah portion is so exciting that we split the difference. I would get to speak tonight about the Parsha. Tomorrow morning, Rabbi Keller will teach Chevra Torah study. I'm dying to just crash it and take over. But nonetheless, Rabbi Keller is going to have a lot of fun with you tomorrow morning at Chevra Torah, as we love Chevra Torah. But I get tonight. So Vayetze has so many subplots, so many stories within the Parsha. Who knows what to choose? But I'm going to choose the one that is the most famous, which if you've ever enjoyed the Agam painting of Jacob's ladder, if you have a print of it, if you have an original of it, by all means, but if you have a print of it or you have the opportunity throughout the Shabbat to go online and look at the Agam paintings of Jacob's ladder with the angels flying around, that is in the very beginning of this Parsha. And we all know that story, I hope, of Jacob and his ladder and the angels. Yes? I hope. If you don't, you're in for a treat. I'll sure you'll mention it tomorrow morning at some point. Here's what the Torah tells us. It's a very, it's for the Torah, a very long-winded series of verses. Sammy's going to be chanting these tomorrow morning, right? About the sulam, about the ladder. And it's spread over many verses. And the Torah, as you know, doesn't give us a whole lot of details, descriptions about events or places unless it's really, really, really important. And of course, this epiphany is important. It says the following. He leaves home, by the way, last week, stole the blessing, leaves home, because he's worried that Esau is going to kill him. And that will get picked up on next week. So it says, he, Jacob, came upon a certain place. And by the way, this word makom, hamakom, the place, is repeated. It's what we learned in rabbinic school. It's what's called a Leitwort in German, which means a word that is repeated many times in a piece of literature, in a passage, which means that it's an important word. Hamakom, the place, or a place, is synonymous, or it's a euphemism of what in the Torah? God. The place is the place. It's a name of God. Hamakom. So in other words, a place where you stand, like in a synagogue, can be a place where God stands as well. It can be God, actually. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night. Taking one of the stones of that place, second time, he put it under his head and lay down in that place, third time. He had a dream, if you all remember, a stairway going from the earth to the heavens. And he saw angels going up and down. And it says in the Parsha, and Adonai was standing beside Jacob. He was standing right there with him. Jacob wakes up, startled, and says, Achein yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. Surely God is present in this place, and I did not know it. Famous words that we place outside the sanctuary, the religious school building, the preschool building of the synagogue, so that before you walk in, because this is a holy place, the sanctuary where our learning happens are holy places, and what we're trying to say is refrain from doing what you do outside, i.e., maybe give a little attitude, maybe be a little bit assertive or aggressive, maybe not choosing the right words all the time, maybe gossiping. Don't do that in here. because this is a place of God, lest you realize how many times, I did it tonight actually, I actually said before the service to someone, I know I'm in a synagogue and I shouldn't say this. We say that all the time, right? Well, I say it all the time. You don't, but I do. And so when he says, Achein yesh Adonai, God is in this place, va'anochi, and I, lo yadati, I didn't know it. Jacob is having a moment that the rabbis pounce on. They want to understand why it is that he repeats the word I 2 times. Anochi, I, and yadati, I didn't know. How often, we should ask, do we find ourselves in the presence of God, with God standing right next to us at crucial moments of our lives, especially in moments that are startling, frightening, scary, and traumatic, moments where we are moved, where we can feel our souls making a seismic shift, and we definitely, even if we don't acknowledge it at that moment, can look back on it months later or years later and say, that was a big moment for me. That was an important moment. That was something that changed my life. If I went around this sanctuary and asked the adults, tell me a moment of definition in your life, a moment of transcendence, a moment that really changed your character, who you are, you would pretty quickly be able to tell me that moment and explain it. And you probably would say, similar to Jacob, I didn't know at the time that it was as transformative as it was. And that's what happens to Jacob. By the way, this is why I believe, and I'm not the only one, I'm basing this in tradition, that Jacob becomes the person, the name by which we are all called. The house of Jacob, or the house of Israel, our synagogue, Beth Israel, Beit Israel. We're not called Beit Avraham. We're not called Beit Yitzchak, the house of Jacob, the house of Abraham, or the house of Isaac. We're called the house of Jacob, or the house of Israel. And I believe that because he is the most like us. It's as if the ancestors get a little less perfect as we go down the line. Abraham, the tzaddik, the perfectly righteous. Isaac has a few issues with favoritism of her one son over the other. And now Jacob, the most real. So what are these 2 eyes? I believe that these 2 eyes symbolize different parts of his life. This was the moment that he could draw to and say, that changed my life forever. The 2 eyes represent symbolically the seismic shift for Jacob. From the Jacob of entitlement, the mama's boy who didn't leave home, the guy who tricked his father, the guy who was me all along, who wanted that blessing, who wanted that birthright, to the second eye, the eye that represents the future, the moment of transition into that place where he is going to be the progenitor, number 1, of the house of Israel, of his namesake, which is us. And the rabbis, in their commentaries, expound upon this. And as Jacob reflects, they teach us, on this encounter with God standing right next to him by his side, he really is acknowledging the 2 eyes, the one that was past and the one that from this moment on will be separate, as if he is completely born again, born anew, becomes as if a new person. There are 2 eyes, I believe, that are within our experiences and our lives as well. There's the eye that was, and after the trauma, the scary moment, the life transformative experience, and people would draw to the time that their parent died, the time that their spouse died, the time that they had a child, the time that something really seismic happened, as when that second eye comes in. And so Jacob is really acknowledging that he's a changed man, from that frightened young man to a man prepared to take responsibility for his life. And not only does he acknowledge it, but as we learn, he really does something about it and with it in the coming part of this parsha and in the weeks to come as well. But this is also a theme that is picked up on in Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, in the Zohar. For the rabbis, what they draw attention to is actually this idea of Jacob getting this stone, being in this place of God, laying down on the stone in this place of God, falling asleep and having God with him. For the Kabbalists, for them, the act of falling asleep every night, just not only in this story where Jacob wakes up and names it Bethel and has that profound moment of I-E-ness. I like to make up words. For them, the act of falling asleep every night can really be life-changing and have a significant seismic impact for each of us on our souls, depending how we do it. In other words, when the liturgy, when the prayers are recited each morning, the first prayer that we say, Modeh ani lefanecha, shehechazarta bi nishmati, God, I am thankful to you for returning my soul within my body. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago when we did Death, Dying, and the Afterlife. The rabbis believe that actually, in that moment of deepest sleep, we are paralyzed, we are almost dead, mostly dead. 1/60th, they actually give it. There is a fractional death experience when we fall asleep. And we're thanking God, Modeh ani lefanecha, shehechazarta bi nishmati, that you returned my soul to me. The rabbis in the Zohar pick up on that. They teach that human beings assume during our daytime hours, our non-sleep hours, sort of an outward form through a medium of an outer garment. Not just our clothes, per se, but these masks that we wear. That part of us which is not our essence, which is artificial, if you will. That is not pure. The stuff we do when we honk at someone or cut someone off or yell at someone on the phone, that stuff is all outer. That is an outer garment of our bodies and our souls, which everyone else sees on a daily basis. And we actually, when we look in the mirror, that's what we see too, is that outer garment. But they taught us that every night when we go to sleep, that garment, that outer garment, that us, that I that is conscious, that I that is sometimes sinful, that I that sometimes doesn't exactly make the mark during the day, the good acts and the bad acts of everyday life, that those are completely, that outer garment, God actually takes it away from us, and it's consumed by this great heavenly fire. And for a moment in time, we too stand with God, just like Jacob did. Just for a moment, in that moment of paralysis when we're asleep, in that moment when our souls are in God's hands, we're actually, each one of us, standing with God. And in that second, in that split second, we revert to our pure essence, to our neshama, our soul. That's why the other prayer we say in the morning is, God, the soul that you have given me is pure. It's an acknowledgement, thank you, God, for returning my soul to me. And second, I know better. My soul is pure. It's meant to do better things and move me in better ways. So in other words, the rabbis say that outer garment is shed. For a split second, God stands with us, and we revert to our essences, our states of nature, which are tehorahi, pure. This is, by the way, one of the reasons the rabbis teach that we also, if you know this, I'm sure you've had this experience, you ever woken up and not known where you are? Just for a second, you don't know where you are, right? You don't know who that person next to you is. You have to just gather yourself. The rabbis teach that moment, that is us repositioning ourselves from that experience that we had with God that night before while we were asleep. In other words, that we learn that we are new. We have to reboot. You know, when you reboot the computer, it takes a few seconds for that little thing, that squiggly thing. And in our modern times, we forget that squiggly thing was about a 10-minute process. And now if it doesn't happen in 1 second, we freak out if the window doesn't open. But in our reboot, that's when we wake up not knowing where we are, or not knowing. I actually feel that way most of the day. But nonetheless, the rabbis acknowledge that moment as the moment when we have to recalibrate or reboot. We are accordingly, and according to this mystic interpretation, new every day. We are born anew every day. We learn, therefore, that there is a newness to us. And that takes us back to Jacob. God was in this place, va'anochi lo yadati, and I did not know it. We all are an I, but that was yesterday's I. And when we make up anew, we are I version 2. Steve.2 is what I will be tomorrow morning. And it's a fascinating idea, and it's incredibly powerful, because imagine what would it be like to say tomorrow morning when we wake up. Actually, for Sammy, he's going to be able to say this, because tomorrow is sort of a life-shifting day, yes? Yes. Talk about version 2. Wow. What would it be like to say in the morning when we wake up, this morning, I am not the same person I was when I went to bed last night? It's the same thing as Anochi and Lo Yadati. I am different. I am new. How would that kind of statement and thought change how we act and think every single day if we wake up after we say Modeh ani lefanecha and Eloheinu shama shenatata bi, thank you, God, for returning my soul, and the soul that you have given me is pure. What if we actually for a second thought to ourselves, I'm a different person today than I was yesterday? What would it be like if every day we thought every morning is new? Achein yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh. God is in this place. God actually stood with me last night while I was asleep. And that's how we enter the world for that day. That's how we enter that day. It's more than just being conscious. It's more than just taking a moment. It's really about an experience that it's trite, I believe, to say every day is a gift. It's trite. We say it too much, and then we don't do anything about it. But it's not trite, because every day is new. We've never had that day before. On the Shabbat, I would ask, and I am someone who needs this very much, this idea, this concept. That's why I'm enjoying speaking about it tonight, and would love to talk about it tomorrow morning at Hebrew Torah, but I'm not allowed to. What would it be like if tomorrow morning and Sunday morning and every morning for the rest of our lives, we were able to say, today I am new. I am a new I. What would it be like? What could we do if given a new chance every single morning? By the way, you get a new chance every single morning. May we be worthy to be the descendants of Jacob, from who we learn that it is not only okay, but sometimes necessary to treat moments in time as moments of transcendence, and acknowledge that we have the opportunity and the ability and the blessing to be new people every single 24 hours, every single day. Shabbat Shalom.